Hello guys, welcome to Open Techno. Today we're going to talk about the DIVOOM TIMESFRAME, this digital frame I have behind me, which will be useful for a lot of things. From constantly displaying our favorite photos and videos, to getting information. Like, for example, the number of followers we have on TikTok, the views a video has gotten on YouTube, among other things, so let's see what it's about and check out how it works. Well, this is the DIVOOM TIMESFRAME. Some time ago, we saw another DIVOOM device on the channel. For all of you who don't remember or haven't seen that video, DIVOOM is a brand that tries to create products with a retro style, but with modern technology or functionality. In the case of what we saw earlier on the channel, it was a very small device with 4 mechanical keys where we could play some mini games, play music, use it as an external speaker, and more. It was an interesting little device, and above all, also a decorative item. In this case, the DIVOOM frame follows that same path. It's an item that we can put, for example, on top of a cabinet where our guests, whenever they visit, can see our favorite photos displayed dynamically. It's a device that has a 10.1-inch IPS display on the front, and it has a semi-transparent effect. It gives the feeling that when we're looking at this digital frame, we can see beyond it, and we can even see what's behind it. However, that's not the case, but it creates this effect that honestly is pretty cool. As for the dimensions of this digital frame, it's about a handspan tall, just to give you an idea of its approximate size. In this case, we have 64 GB of storage space, which will allow us to store more than 700,000 photos. We'll also be able to store videos. In these 64 GB, we can fit around 6,000 minutes of video in this vertical format. Of course, it has both Wi-Fi and Bluetooth technology, so we can connect from our mobile phone and send information as quickly as possible. And I should also mention that it has RGB lights on the left side. Here, well, it looks like there are some valves or maybe some capacitors, I don't know, in different colors. Well, I'm not sure exactly what it's trying to simulate, but anyway, we can set different effects that we'll see later. They can even follow the sound or the music we have in the room. On the right side, we have, well, here there's a little metallic bar that also gives it a retro touch, and then we have several buttons. We have 4 buttons with which we can configure things like the brightness, turn off the screen, and so on. And with the bottom one, we can set up different watch faces, or faces, as the brand calls them in English. In the end, they're just watch faces. However, later in the video, we'll see that I think it's better to set up the watch faces from the mobile app, which will give us many more options. As for the watch faces, well, the main appeal of this device is really here. What kind of information can these watch faces offer us? I'd say the main purpose is really to show photos and videos to people who come to our house, to put it on top of a shelf so that in the living room, while you're eating or talking, photos are being displayed, and maybe it even sparks a new topic of conversation. To me, that's one of the most useful things, but it also serves other purposes. For example, I set up a watch face to display photos. The photos are small, but it also gives me information about the stock values I have in my portfolio, some notes like the shopping list or tasks we need to do, today's date on the calendar, or for example, the weather. All of this works with widgets that are perfectly customizable, each one of them. Now, for this kind of themes, we have more than 400 to choose from in the DIVOOM store. These are created by artists, just like the designs of the things we want to use to decorate our cover are also made by digital artists. And in the end, they offer us those more than 400 covers that they can provide. Well, a retro Wild West style, or they can give us a modern design, or a hacker design, or a minimalist design. Anyway, we have a lot of things that we're now going to see directly from the phone that we can set up in this DIVOOM TIMESFRAME. Among other things, we can also set alarms, Pomodoro timers, and more. Now it's fully compatible, we can set it up from both Android and iPhone. And then, once we have it more or less set up the way we like, we don't even need the phone anymore because we can change the watch faces directly with one of the knobs on the right side. I forgot to mention that on the back we have backlighting, which gives us a white light that reflects against the background of our DIVOOM TIMESFRAME. As for how this DIVOOM TIMESFRAME is powered, it will constantly require a USB-C adapter. The cable comes in the box, but it's true that we have to provide the adapter or power source ourselves. On the other hand, this digital frame doesn't have any kind of battery, so if we turn off or disconnect the power adapter, it will turn off. I mean, it's not that it's going to disappear, it's just that this digital frame will simply turn off, and there's no better way to see what this DIVOOM time frame can do than by seeing it in action. Let's start with the mobile app from left to right. This would be the main screen from which we can control the entire device. Of course, we can turn it off if we're sleeping and don't want any brightness in the room, or we can turn the screen back on. Then, in this menu, we'll be able to control the screen brightness, but if we go in here, we'll also be able to control the ambient light, which would be the little light we have on the left side. There we set the color all the way up, and here we're going to configure the little lights on this left side. We can make it move to the rhythm of the music. If, for example, we usually have music in our room, then we could set this effect so it moves, well, to that rhythm. If not, we can set random patterns. I'm gonna turn it a bit so you can really see what I mean. There you can see that it has a random pattern, while if I set, for example, the music one, it moves while I'm talking, but if I stop talking, it stays still. But anyway, we have countless color effects for this side. If we go further down, we can enter the device settings, which is pretty much the same, along with some settings where we can set, for example, a night mode. For certain hours when, we want the brightness to go down so it doesn't strain our eyes or disturb our rest. We can also set a different color temperature in case we want it warmer or cooler. In this case, for example, we would go for a much warmer color, and here for a much cooler one. Here we can set things like, for example, the clock we want to start when we turn on our DIVOOM time frame for the first time. Well, the picture we want to have displayed, or things like, for example, whether we want to play the volume of the videos when we have photos or not. I'm going to turn it up a bit so you can later hear how the photo transition speed sounds, and, well, the effects you want it to use to switch between one photo and another if we want it to show the time, the weather, and other things. Also, it can notify us, of course, about notifications from our phone, and, well, we have some other settings that you can explore. Then, here we have the photo album, which is basically, well, when we add photos, which ones we want to be in our library. In my case, for example, I have these 4 imported because I really like cars and motorcycles and so on, but we can import more. Here you can see that, for example, a video has started and it's playing at the volume I mentioned earlier. Let's lower it a bit. Let's add, for example, a photo here that I have from a day I went out with. Well, a car that someone lent me. I also have some photos here of my hamster, some photos of cars I like as well. Here we have a photo, well, in a mountain area. Well, we could go ahead and select all the photos we want. Now we would click next and it will ask us to adjust the image to, well, the size of the frame. It can do it automatically. Here we can see that it does it pretty well with all the photos I've added, and we would just click done so it uploads these photos to the device, and they also go into the album it will rotate through. There we see that the transfer is completed, and now it starts playing, well, videos, photos, and so on, but now with this new variety of photos we've added. In design, what we can do is create our own photos. For example, I generated this one with artificial intelligence. I asked it to generate a Miata for me. Well, as you can see, it's not exact, but it's cool. Well, I asked for it in an anime style. We can also generate new photos. As you can see here, we can type Ferrari in London, and let's see what it generates for us automatically with artificial intelligence. Well, it's not the most accurate photo in the world, but honestly it's cool and it generates things that are nice to maybe use as a background. We can tweak this and create a cool prompt, and we can make our own personalized photos there with a style that's kind of retro, gamer, really cool. Of course, we're gonna have a community for drawings, videos, and little things that we can share. For example, if we want a reindeer here that moves constantly, we'll be able to add it. Here we have a rabbit driving a car, and we could leave all of this playing in the background on our DIVOOM time frame. Now we can also connect with our friends and, for example, send messages here. In my case, we can put a message here saying hello with one of these emojis. And there we see that our message appears in the center of the screen. Well, it has little details like these. Then we can also set Pomodoro timers. If we are, for example, studying, we can set the time we want to study here, and so on. And here we could start our Pomodoro timer. We see that we have 25 minutes to study. The goal is to pass, and well, when this time is up, it will give us 5 minutes of rest, and so on. We can also connect our DIVOOM time frame with Google Calendar, Microsoft Calendar. We can set timers, countdowns. We can create schedules for, the times when we want to do each thing. And during those times, for example, animations or drawings can appear. For example, in my case, I'm going to set it up. Here, this goes until 10 o'clock, and we're going to set the design to be this snowman again. And as you can see, we can set up our schedule of things so that it appears directly in the time frame. And, during the hours when we don't have anything to do, these animations would simply disappear. Here it shows us that we have 1 hour, 11 minutes, and 15 seconds left for, this action, and it appears with the emoji that we set up, as well as, the current day. I'm going to turn off the weather and temperature so we can see the rest of the clock faces we can use. We can also add a scoreboard or a counter, so if we're, for example, playing family games and we want to keep track here, we can see who has won a round or whatever. Well, we have this option, which honestly looks pretty cool. On the other hand, we can of course set alarms. We can use it as an alarm clock if we have it near the bed and some other things, although mainly it's everything I've mentioned. Well, for example, we have this, which would be a noise meter that, as you can see, measures the current decibel levels. Now, the cool thing is that it's going to show us on the screen when we're in standby mode. We'll have a bunch of faces or watch faces or whatever you want to call them. Let's check out some of the main ones. For example, this one is going to show us the photos and videos we've added to our gallery. Here we could add countless photos because we'll have 64 gigs of storage. Then we have this one, which is for display routines. This one, for example, which I really like, is Simple Clock. Basically, here we can set up whatever we want in the top left corner. We can add notes. Here we could change it, okay? We could put a comment here directly. Here there's a shopping list. Well, some tasks we have to do, like calling mom, or we could also change it to show the days left until Christmas. There you can see there are 9 days left on the right. We have the option to add a clock showing the time, or to add an analog clock directly. In this case, I also like the one that shows us the day of the month, and it displays it there with the little numbers. Then here on the left, we can add different things. For example, I have the photos that we had in the gallery before, and on the right, we can put a calendar. We can put a subscriber counter for our YouTube channel. In this case, it's set to DIVOOM's channel, but here we could configure it as we like. We simply go into the search for the YouTube channel, and we're going to put Open Techno, and here we would have both the number of videos we have on Open Techno. The number of comments isn't loading right now because this is really made for a single video. Views, well, those are the ones shown there. Anyway, that's information about our YouTube channel, but as I said, we could put 171,000 subscribers. We could also include, for example, followers on TikTok or other things like the US markets, which is something I really like. And it would show us real-time quotes. At the bottom, well, we have the time displayed, and we could also add some other weather data like pressure, visibility, wind, and chances of rain. Let's quickly review what else we have, since we have others with different styles. For example, an influencer one for all our social networks, and we would always have them here in real time. We also have this investment section, which I think is super complete. Although, well, the design is maybe a little bit busy. Here we have a sort of Windows 95 where we can add photos, days until Halloween, Valentine's Day, St. Valentine's. Anyway, we can add a lot of things. Photos of cities, which actually looks a lot like an iPhone interface. Photos, for example, of a wedding, the anniversary, and so on. And well, different things. There are some that I really like. For example, this one seems quite original to me. And we have a complete one for a YouTube channel, for example, the price of Bitcoin. Or this one, which I really like to keep track of all the stocks I have in my portfolio. We have another one for Christmas. The points. I understand this is from a baseball league or something like that in the United States. Honestly, I have no idea about that at all. And well, there are some other designs that are interesting. Of course, we can get many more of these faces in the free store we have. Here we have countless options. For example, here's one with an old-fashioned style, kind of like a newspaper. Let's see how it looks. The transfer of this design to the time frame happens right away, and here we can see it, which is great because we can fully customize it to our liking with our photos and anything else we want. As I showed you before, we have a community to download designs that we can use anywhere. And then, well, some other things like, well, Spanish chats to build a community and so on. Lastly, I want to mention that we have 2 dials here and a couple of buttons that allow us to adjust and change some things without needing our mobile device. For example, well, the ambient effects, the color, the volume, the brightness, and so on. Here we would press the button for them.
¿Dónde atrás?
And here we can change things directly from the times frame itself. And then, to add this one I mentioned that I like so much, it has, well, a super simple interface, and it's very easy to use. We also have some settings where we can add, for example, albums, utilities, alarms, timers, Pomodoro. Anyway, we can also control the device from here. Although the customizations are done from the mobile app itself, the truth is that the interface is quite intuitive. And well, about smoothness, performance, and all that, I can't really say much because it works well, it does its job, which in the end is, you know, to display the photos we want. Now, all that's left is to talk about the price. The price of this DIVOOM TIMESFRAME is around 140 to 150 euros approximately. However, we'll leave the cheapest purchase link we can find in the description. If you have any questions, you can leave them below in the comments. If you enjoyed the video, leave a like and see you next time. Goodbye.